Members, there's a certain amount of inclination up here at the table to work through lunch and get you out of here early rather than waiting. And although the audience, I'm sure, would prefer to go to lunch and come back and hang around till 3:30 or 4, why don't we just see if our crew, reliable crew of electronic folks can keep us on. We're going to suggest to Dr. Goodwin, we do suggest to you that why don't we just proceed with the Delta Science Plan, if that's acceptable to you.
No, I think that would be great if you're comfortable doing so.
We are, and that would be the only remaining item of business on the agenda, so hopefully if we resolve it, members could get out of here a bit early, and the audience too. So why don't we do that, Dr. Goodwin? This is file item number 19, members. File item 19.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off just by teeing off a few of the things that Dr. Luoma said earlier. This is almost the one-year anniversary, almost to the day where we started the science plan progress. And as you know, we very early on took on the moniker of One Delta, One Science. One Delta, I think everybody understands. The One Science, I thought I would just add a slight clarification to. This does not mean that there's one opinion or one model, but it's science in the broadest sense. And within this, we want to embrace differences of scientific opinion. We want to support different models, because this is how you accelerate knowledge discovery, by testing alternative hypotheses, by running models which make different assumptions, and comparing and contrasting the difference. So these are many of the principles. We also wanted to give a safe environment, if you like that, where scientists can explore different ideas without feeling that they're representing a particular interest or they're going to be attacked. We also recognize that decisions have to be made in the face of uncertainty, and right at the start of the process, Director Cowan gave a very eloquent talk at the Delta Science Conference last year about the importance of uncertainty. The last principle before we step into it that I think is really important, and this also came out in the essays, and that is understanding the limitations of science and what science can do for you. And so science is not going to make the decisions, nor should science make the decisions. Because for an ultimate decision, there's value judgment. What science can tell you is the most likely outcome, or what is the most likely future that you're going to be experiencing as a result of certain actions that are taken. But with the final decisions, if you're looking at, say, contrasting or one endangered species over another, there has to be some value judgment in those decisions. So if we can go to the PowerPoint presentation. This is very, very brief.
Okay. And I think we have a copy of the slides here in front of us.
Right.
Yes.
So they're in front of you. For those of you who are here live, there should be some on the table outside, and of course it will be posted on Monday for those of you who are listening in. So the objective today is we would like you to take action. That's in the file in front of you. We'd like to make one slight adjustment to that, but that's what we are after. What I would like to do in this very brief presentation is not go through the entire science plan. We've had extensive discussions on that. But we'd like to give you the highlights from the past year of how we're building this community of science. Secondly, I would like to highlight the responses, in particular to some of your comments, to the Delta Independent Science Board, and the important public comments. And then we'd like to say, with your permission and the action, where we would like to go from here. So this has been a very long journey. We've had well over 1,000 individual comments. Here it lists the various agencies and groups that have commented. But what's really struck me as someone from the outside is that really from the very start, the principles which are here, how the science program is structured, this move towards collaborative science, or in more general terms, it's usually referred to as community science, there were very little comments on how we're proposing to structure things. Virtually all of the comments were very important, but they were related to the details. How are we included? How can we participate? How can we support this effort? There were also some really wonderful ideas for conflict management on science issues that we've listened to. And I think in terms of the essays, we have some real innovations there. And the final thing I would like to say, Dr. Luoma mentioned in your presentation about the depth of science here, and you've probably heard me talk that you have, 7 of the top 25 universities in the world here in California, according to the recent China survey. And I think that's just really reflected. If you look at all of those discussions and comments, and in some cases disagreements, it really has an incredible depth of thought. People aren't just saying, this is my opinion. They're saying, have you thought about this? And then there's 5 citations or a really in-depth argument in those comments to be considered. So we've really appreciated that. The final thing that I would say before I jump into this is that we've relied on a lot of people. It's not just our own staff. And many of the scientists are totally overwhelmed right now, whether it's with BDCP, whether it's on the biological opinions. And yet there's this deep-rooted passion amongst the science community here. And many of the big meetings we've had, in order to get people together, they've been in the evenings, they've been at weekends, they've been on holidays, and probably I shouldn't be saying that in a state, but the fact is people have really stepped up around many of these issues, and we really appreciate the UC Davis opening their facilities on holidays and things like that to accommodate us. So this is where we've been. A few of the highlights that you can see you're on here. The Delta Independent Science Board, of course, has weighed in heavily. They've had 7 of their meetings. They've got 2 memos. They're meeting again next week. And it will be interesting for them to hear your feedback. We also really have appreciated IEPs opening up their annual workshop for us to have open science discussions. They've been heavily involved throughout the process on at least a monthly basis. We'd also like to recognize QEMF. You probably heard me talk about this. Sorry about the acronym if you're not familiar with this. This is the California Water and Environmental Modeling Forum. You're essentially a volunteer organization. But in terms of what they have done in hydrodynamic modeling across the Bay Delta is widely held up across the country about how you get disparate modelers together to work together to really get at some very deep-rooted issues and to set community priorities. So we've greatly appreciated the support of QEMF and also some of the activities that are coming up with them in the near future. Of course, the public, you've seen a very, very in-depth response from across the various community. The other thing that I would like to point out, and building again on what Dr. Luoma said earlier, this plan is really built on national and global trends in science. And I actually tweaked this slightly from a very recent presentation from Dr. Blatecki, who heads the National Science Foundation Cyber Infrastructure Directorate. And if you look through this, there's many of the items here which has been what we received from the science community. And I'm not going to go through all of these in any detail. The references are there. But the most important thing is that you look across any branch of science right now, and you look at how research is being done, how the big breakthroughs are being made. The IPCC, your 5th report which has just come out. Basically, science and scholarship are team sports. And hopefully you'll see that as one of the guiding principles within the science plan. I put this up for Chair Eisenberg. I know how much you love the figures, but I also wanted to just stress.
Supervisor Rustaller said that he understood it completely and would be prepared to explain it to anyone who asked.
Yeah. I took one look at this and understood it immediately.
Yeah. No, so I really wanted to concentrate on the yellow box. No. No, actually, my only purpose for putting this up is that California is somewhat different. If you look at most of the other large ecosystem management programs around the country, and I'll probably be heavily criticized after this public comment by some of my colleagues, but most of these other big programs are driven by a single issue. In Louisiana, it's about land building or protection of land. If it's Chesapeake Bay, the driving issue is water quality. Here, you're facing a much more complex problem. In order to get at the co-equal goals, and you look at the stresses, the whole science and what you're asking the science community to do is much more complex. So this is an enormously complex system, and I put this up really just as a joke to show this is a very small element, and yet this is just the conceptual models. Each one of those boxes has a community of scientists around them working on it and individual models that contribute to the final answers. I'd just like to highlight a few of the changes on this slide to the plan from the direction we got from you last time. You pointed out very articulately, particularly the chair and vice chair, about the urgency of the science, and this truly is high-stakes science. As we heard from the BDCP folks yesterday, this issue is enormous. It's directly affecting 25 million residents in the state of California. We're looking here not at millions of dollars consequences of many of the decisions, but billions of dollars are on the line. So you'll see that reflected in the introduction to the plan. You'll also see that the plan has organizing science to inform policy and management, the adaptive management for the complex system, and what is sometimes appreciated is that in order to really conduct science from the community perspective, you need the infrastructure. It's not sufficient just to say, well, let's have a few meetings, let's get together. If you're really starting sharing data, if you're building models, if you're expecting scientists to come to the table who've read the same journal articles as everybody else, there's a lot of infrastructure that currently is not available to our full science community. And so that you'll see a big emphasis on that. And from the fifth element, the resources, what does it actually take to implement? And both you and the Independent Science Board, you had some very strong thoughts about that. Just very quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the plan is divided into two new organizational structures. We have the Policy Science Forum, which is our attempt to link that big divide, which was highlighted in just about every one of those essays that Dr. Luoma collected. How do you have science inform policy in an effective way? So the Policy Science Forum is up there identifying the issues. It's the way the science community communicates with the leaders, those making policy decisions. It's also a way of the policy community of communicating to the science community directly. And this was in response to both Mr. Fiorini and Director Cowan's comments at the very early stage of the process. We then have this science steering committee that interprets that high-level debate into actionable science. The two rotating products that come out of those processes are a science action agenda. This is essentially the work plan without going into details. And then how do you know your work plan is doing any good? So we need this positive feedback mechanism which is the state of Bay Delta science. This is the reporting back of what is the advances in knowledge that were highlighted in the Science Action Agenda, the work plan, and the challenges that were set by the policy community. So there's this continuous loop. You'll see some changes in the state of Bay Delta science. This used to be a hard copy. We will intend to continue that and update. But we also heard that to have best available science, we need to be more dynamic. And so what you'll see in the state of the Bay Delta science, which we've already started work on, is an ability through web pages to have updates as new significant science becomes available. I'd like to also just highlight in the science plan one of the most important issues. There's two important things, as you'll see in a moment. The Independent Science Board highlighted two very important components. One is they said, don't forget what the National Research Council told you. You have to be having synthesis as a priority. Secondly, how do you manage these scientific conflicts? The term combat science. How do we minimize that? Just to highlight a few of the elements in the science plan that we have for doing that. First of all, what we're proposing is on the science of on the staff of the science program themselves. We have what are called rotators. There's a model for this in the federal government. These are when people cycle onto the staff and actually work with the staff on doing things like distributing research dollars, setting up review panels, putting together invited speakers for workshops, and so on. But the idea is that these folks, they come in, they have new ideas, it keeps the science program alive with new ideas, and it also means when those rotators return to their agency or NGO or other organization, local government, that they understand how the science program operates. So it's transparent, there's nothing hidden. Then we have a step. So you asked us about timeline. If the council needs information quickly, how do we get that to you? And so stepping down through the rest of these bullets is really a range of tools which you have available to you. So the simplest thing is that you would come to us with a science question. We may be able to respond to that internally with the expertise that we have on staff, or we can turn to the experts in agencies or other organizations. If we have a little bit longer, we may want to contract directly with expert advisors. We do that right now. We can do that very quickly, where we ask one or two nationally recognized experts for their opinions. The third thing that we can do is invite papers. It could be an invited white paper. It could be, as Chair Eisenberg requested, Dr. Luoma, let's have a few ideas on how you do science. So that's the third tool that you have available to your at your disposal. The fourth item on here is invited review panels. The science program has done this for more than 10 years. Again, from an outside perspective, they do it very well. You'll see there's, in the science plan, we had some really good advice from many, many different people on the guidelines. And similarly with expert workshops, you'll see for transparency how these are put together. The guidelines are also there in an appendix. So these review panels is usually when there's a report or a product to review. Workshops are more exploratory. So there's a big problem out there. You need some information on a certain topic. It takes a little longer to plan and to execute a workshop like that. But then there's a definite outcome and report with recommendations. The sixth method here is something which we really like because it really gets to the collaboration which we're seeing evolving through other processes like CAMT and the Riemann process. The collaborative analysis and synthesis mechanism is a way where there's a clear, legitimate difference of opinion or uncertainty in information. And this is a way to bring the 2 or 3 or 5 different groups with an idea together, and to spend some time with biostatisticians, whatever resources they need, some postdoc researchers, to produce an in-depth analysis and report on a particular issue. If we have longer time to work with, you have your proposal solicitation package where questions can be put out to competitive bid for scientists to get together to conduct certain science or research activities. And the bottom on the list here is the Science Fellows. I think the way in the last few years the Science Fellows programs have been targeted from the questions and what we look for is really an opportunity to bring in a young scientist to work between an agency and a university on a specific issue. So again, if there's a topic out there that we can anticipate ahead of time, bringing in a science fellow is a great way to get to that. Specific changes that you'll see in the science plan are several. There was a very good proposal given by the Independent Science Board. They said, give us a preamble. You put this thing in context. We thought that was a great idea, and we struggled a little bit. Should that be written by us? Should it be written by internal folks? And I've forgotten who came up with the idea. Maybe it was Jessica Pearson. Let's go back to all of the former Delta lead scientists. And Sam, thank you for this. You turned it around in a week. I think you were in England. I don't know where Cliff was. But really, the lead scientists got together, and I think it was in maybe 8 days you produced the preamble. So thanks for that, and I think it really set in context what we're trying to do. You'll see a greater emphasis on synthesis. The revised problem statement, again, Chair Eisenberg, thank you for that. I think it really honed the thinking, so we hope that statement captured your comments from the last council meeting. Also, in response to the comments, and particularly the public comments, you'll see there's 3 new actions included. And also, at the council's recommendation, you told us to prioritize the list of actions. What are you going to do immediately? So you'll see that reflected in the summary table. For next steps, we would respectfully request...
Peter, on the prioritization in the summary table, did you mean the summary table with the green bars at the end of the report?
Yeah, that's correct. So you'll see there that it's broken down to new ongoing activities, enhanced, and then I think it's broken down what immediate, intermediate, and longer-term actions. And I'll actually have a slide that's showing in a moment what we're proposing to do immediately. So what we're hoping is, I'll actually go to that slide in a moment, what we're hoping is that you will pass some sort of motion today on the Delta Science Plan. At your request that I would come back, or the lead scientist would come back and report on the implementation of the Delta Science Plan on a quarterly basis. If something comes up before then, we would just include it in the lead scientist report. But we would have an opportunity for an in-depth discussion on at least a quarterly basis. What we're also suggesting, this is very important, and I would like to acknowledge Dr. Wegner for his suggestion. We really went extremely broadly with input, and Dr. Wegner gave us some very good advice, we thought. And he has tremendous experience in the Grand Canyon, the artificial flooding program. You've met many other major projects like this around the US. And what his advice was, it mirrored Dr. Wien's comment from the ISB, and that is, when is good enough? And he said that we could sit and debate and agonize on the wording of the science plan for many months, and we probably wouldn't get much further. And his recommendation was, it looks pretty good. If people are comfortable with it, start. But come back 12 months at the end of 2014. You have monitoring throughout that year, but do a very strong independent assessment of the science plan after 12 months. What's working really well? That's great. What areas need tweaking? And we thought that was just a great idea, and we would like to embrace that. So that we would start right at the beginning with an assessment from the outside, come back, you collect data for a year, and then consider an update which we take back to the science community and to you. And the next steps too is just implementing the immediate high priority actions. These are listed here. You can't see it on the screen for the folks here in the room, but they're just listed. I won't spend time on it now unless you have any your particular questions. And finally, I would just like to just give an example of the timeline here, if you have any questions. If we have the science plan going very shortly, we're proposing an interim science action agenda. This is a detailed work plan in the early part of 2014. I should be clear that we're not proposing to do a full interim science action agenda for two reasons. One is a lot of work has been done by groups like IEP, BDCP, and many others. We intend to build on that. Secondly, to really get this right, talking to the science programs around the country that have adopted this, like Puget Sound, the Everglades, it's really a 2-year process to do it. And we don't want to sit around waiting for that. So in the interim science action agenda, this will be discussed through Rainer's leadership next week. But our idea was to do a synthesis of all of the good work that's out there and look for the gaps and get something that we can start running with. By the end of next year, we also hope to have the state of Bay Delta science completed. This will be the update, the starting point, the baseline for this new paradigm, this new era of doing science in the Delta. And then sometime in 2015, we would like to take the independent assessment, which we do, we would like to take that back to the broad science community and to you, and then make whatever tweaks are necessary, with, of course, that feeding up to the Delta plan. What you can see along there on the bottom are the big annual conferences that we intend to use to the extent we can, as well as using the IEP conference and the QEMP conference. We found that extremely good forum for us to discuss issues. So I will stop there. I would just like to acknowledge everyone, not just our staff, but literally hundreds of people that have contributed. And it's a pity Mr. Nordhoff isn't here. If you recall, he encouraged us to really look not just nationally, but internationally. And of the many comments we got, I thought one of the most innovative and interesting was from Dr. Philippe Gorbesville. And just his project you might be interested to know. He's a French professor, and Monaco has run out of real estate. And they're planning this project of constructing a massive artificial island with casinos and hotels and high-end development floating in the Mediterranean directly off the southern France. Now, that country is not part of the European Union, so they're not governed by EU laws. So again, high profile to do the science that will help inform a project like that. He had some very interesting perspectives. So I will stop there. We will love to take any questions or advice that you have.
Ms. Gray.
What's that?
Thank you, Dr. Goodwin, for your report. I just wanted to provide some comments and feedback that I've heard from the different stakeholders that you've been meeting with throughout the process, and I want to commend you for your outreach, because I think it's important that we do include as many perspectives as we can, so I want to commend you for that. I also wanted to say that I think it's important when you speak to the next step and the fact that you start in the process. It's not the end of everything, that it will be reviewed as we move forward, and that whatever necessary changes will be made. And I think that's important for the public to know. So thank you for that. I want to commend the staff here and all of those who have been involved in the process. I hear your final third draft. It's something that people say it's much better than the first one, which is a good step. It's a good sign that we're moving forward with it. So again, I just want to commend you for your outreach today. And whenever it's appropriate, I'd like to move the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see about questions first. Other questions? Mr. Fiorini?
Well, let me just say this. That,
Mr. Damrell?
Yes. There was earlier comment on by my colleague here, Mr. Fiorini, that the nexus
Get
of
closer to your mic, please.
the nexus of policy and science is the answer to whatever questions we're going to ask. We've got to make sure that those questions are appropriate, and you're helping us ask those questions. And I see no way out of this situation that the state finds itself without science connected to policy.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay. Do we have any folks from the audience who want to talk? Okay. We do.